22-27, the Raiders are at a crossroads, and Fernando Mendoza might just force everyone's hand. There's a moment in every franchise rebuild when the whole thing stops being a fancy presentation and starts getting real. When the slick PowerPoint decks, the draft board number crunching, and the carefully polished press releases about building the right way. When all of that stops living inside a boardroom and starts breathing on an actual grass field. A real human being in a real uniform throwing a real football to real teammates. That moment landed in Las Vegas this week, and honestly, I haven't been able to get it out of my head since Fernando Mendoza slipped on a Raiders jersey, walked out onto that practice field, took snaps under the Las Vegas coaching staff, and just like that, every projection I'd been running through my brain for the past 4 months either got confirmed or got blown up entirely. There's no comfortable middle ground anymore. The "let's theorize about this kid" phase is officially over. We are in the real thing now, folks. And what I saw in those early OTA clips, it wasn't what I expected. It was more interesting, more layered, and honestly more exciting than I'm ready to fully admit without slapping a dozen caveats on it. But hey, that's what we're here for. So let's get into it. And before we go any further, if you're new here and you enjoy honest, no-fluff football analysis, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing and means everything. Now, back to business. Let me be straight with you before I go any further, because intellectual honesty matters a whole lot more to me than sounding like I've got all the answers. May football is basically a hall of mirrors. Early voluntary OTAs don't show you how a quarterback holds his composure when a 270-pound edge rusher is barreling through the B gap with bad intentions. They don't show you how a young passer's eyes behave when a crafty veteran safety gives him a high shell look and then rotates down at the snap to snatch away the crossing route he thought was wide open. They don't show you what happens to a quarterback's internal clock when being wrong has real, immediate, painful consequences. All of that gets dragged out into the open later, in pads, in August heat, when the competition stops being polite and starts being cutthroat. What these early spring sessions can genuinely tell you is narrower, but still worth paying attention to. Ball flight mechanics, the natural rhythm of a delivery. And maybe most importantly, whether a quarterback looks like he belongs in this environment, or whether the environment is still sitting on his chest like a heavy weight he hasn't figured out how to lift yet. On those specific, legitimate measures, Mendoza was something else entirely. I watched the clips more than once, specifically because I didn't trust my own first reaction. I was actively searching for confirmation bias. I was trying to catch myself seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was actually there. And even after running that skeptical filter through everything a second and third time, the release held up. The spiral is genuinely tight. The trajectory control on intermediate throws is precise in a way that simply doesn't show up on a combine sheet. You have to see it to appreciate it. But here's what really got me. The thing I keep coming back to every single time. The physical looseness. There's this ease to the way Mendoza delivers a football that feels almost untouched by the mental weight of everything happening around him. And that matters more than it might sound on the surface. Drop a comment below if you want me to do a deeper breakdown of what physical looseness in a delivery actually signals, because it's a topic that deserves its own video. Here's something I've seen happen to promising quarterbacks more times than I care to count. A guy walks into his first NFL environment carrying a clean, fluid release, something built over years of muscle memory, thousands of reps, countless hours on practice fields just like this one. And then, gradually, sometimes over months and sometimes faster than that, the mental demands of professional football start colonizing his mechanics. He's processing protection assignments, coverage rotations, route adjustments, and pre-snap communication all at once, and the brain starts fighting the body for the same limited resources. The first thing that pays the price? The looseness in the delivery. The rhythm turns mechanical. The release tightens up. You can watch it happen in real time on film if you know what to look for. The quarterback starts looking like someone trying to do 10 things correctly, rather than someone doing one thing naturally. It's a painful thing to witness. Mendoza, through these early sessions, doesn't look like that's happening yet. The looseness is intact, and that's not a cosmetic observation. It's a real functional signal about how his mental processing is managing the transition from college football to the professional level. It tells you something genuine about the bandwidth capacity of the person throwing the football, not just the arm doing the throwing. I'm not ready to call it a conclusion, but I'm absolutely ready to call it a meaningful early data point. And in this business, meaningful early data points are worth talking about out loud. If this kind of deep dive analysis is your thing, make sure you're subscribed and smash that like button while you're at it. It genuinely helps more people find this content. Now, Kirk Cousins was also out there, and I want to be fair with you about what I observed, because fairness matters here, even when it creates an uncomfortable contrast. 14 years of professional football produces something undeniably real: a reliability, a technical cleanliness, a professional execution that doesn't wobble under pressure. Cousins looked exactly like what he is: a proven, battle-tested veteran who knows precisely where the football needs to go and gets it there without any unnecessary drama. The throw to Dante Thornton was accurate. It landed exactly where it needed to land. Mechanically, nothing was wrong with anything he did. I want to be crystal clear about that, but here's the thing I cannot unsee, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to sound balanced. When you watch Mendoza's release alongside Cousins in the same session, on the same day, against the same backdrop, you're not watching two quarterbacks competing for one job. You're watching two completely different categories of decision that a franchise has to make. One quarterback represents what this team can be for the next 2 years. The other represents what this team could be for the next decade. One is a bridge, functional, reliable, keeping the organization operational while everything around it gets constructed. The other is the destination. And the longer this summer competition runs and the more evidence piles up, the harder it's going to be for anyone, coaches, front office, media, fans, to look at both of those truths at the same time and pretend the situation is genuinely unresolved. Now I need to talk about something that isn't getting nearly the attention it deserves. Pay close attention here, because this is the kind of detail that reveals how an organization actually thinks far more clearly than any press conference ever could. As OTAs continue and media gets full access to practices, watch the rep distribution. And I mean actually track it. Which quarterback is taking first-team reps? Which receivers are being deployed for which quarterback? Is Mendoza consistently working against the starters, or is he being cycled through the second unit in a way that quietly telegraphs the organizational hierarchy before anyone has officially declared one? This is not a minor procedural footnote. Rep distribution in spring practice is one of the most direct and honest communications a coaching staff makes about how it actually views a competition, as opposed to the carefully hedged language they deliver from a podium with a microphone in their face. Coaches manage their public words constantly and skillfully. They manage rep distribution far less consciously. And that's precisely why it tells you so much more. Seriously. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Leave a comment telling me whether you think Mendoza should start week 1. I read every single one. On the defensive side of the ball, this group deserves its proper acknowledgement, because what's being assembled here is worth direct recognition rather than being treated as a footnote to the quarterback conversation. The linebacker pairing of Nico, Dean, and Kay Walker is something I didn't fully anticipate being as invested in as I currently am. The athleticism and range they bring together, covering ground against the run, matching up in space against receiving backs and tight ends. holding up in coverage situations that expose most linebacker pairs, has the potential to be one of the most consequential strengths on this entire roster once the season gets to the games that actually matter. Nobody is talking about it in any meaningful way right now. They will be before Thanksgiving. Mark that down. Jaden Mickens is the player I'm watching most carefully on the entire defensive side of the ball. And the story attached to him is one of the more compelling individual threads running through this roster. First-round caliber talent pushed into the fourth round by injury concerns. A 4.33 at his pro day. Technical fluidity through rookie minicamp that genuinely impressed the people paying close enough attention to notice. If he arrives at training camp healthy and at full capacity, the coverage quality across this secondary forces every member of that group to perform at the absolute ceiling of their range just to hold on to a roster spot. That level of internal competition doesn't just make the competition sharper. It makes every individual in the room demonstrably better over the course of a summer. Elevation through pressure. It's a real phenomenon. Keon Crossan at edge rusher is a name that deserves considerably more coverage than it's currently generating. The depth situation behind Max Crosby creates an opening that isn't just significant. It's the kind of role that can define an entire career if the right player steps into it. Right now, offensive coordinators can construct their protection plans primarily around containing Crosby and accept the exposure on the other side. A true second threat changes that calculation completely. It makes every player on this defensive front more dangerous, including Crosby himself, because no protection scheme can eliminate both threats simultaneously. The player who claims that role and performs in it earns something beyond a roster spot. He earns organizational leverage. That's real currency in this league. DJ Glaze enters camp as the right tackle frontrunner with real starting experience behind him. And Colton Miller at left tackle is one of the most persistently underappreciated foundational pieces on this entire roster. He's the kind of player who performs at a high level consistently enough that the performance becomes invisible, and people only notice the left tackle when something goes wrong. Miller has spent years giving people very little to notice. That's a compliment of the highest order. Here's where I actually land on all of it. And I want to be as honest as I'm capable of being about where I genuinely stand. Rather than hiding behind a fortress of qualifications, this Raiders roster is exciting in a way that goes beyond the predictable optimism cycle every fan base runs through in the spring when the weather is nice and nobody has lost a game yet. The talent assembled in Las Vegas right now is real talent, assembled with coherent organizational direction. It's not a collection of available pieces hoping that favorable outcomes emerge from their general proximity to each other. There is actual, visible intent in the construction, and that's rarer than it should be in this league. But the quarterback situation remains the unresolved, gravitational center that everything else orbits around. And it's going to stay that way until training camp arrives and the competitive pressure makes avoidance structurally impossible. Kubiak has told you his preference. He's been explicit about it. The tension between that stated preference and what the competitive evidence might eventually force is real. It's building, and it's going to intensify through every week of OTAs and mandatory minicamp until August makes the conversation completely unavoidable for everyone involved. What I believe? Based on everything Mendoza has shown through these early sessions, based on the release and the looseness and the ball placement and the physical ease of a quarterback who genuinely looks like he belongs in this environment, is this. If he keeps performing at the level his preparation and talent suggest he's capable of performing, the argument for keeping him on the sideline when real games begin is going to become increasingly difficult to make with a straight face. Coaching staffs arrive in the spring with plans they genuinely believe in. Quarterbacks who consistently outperform those plans have a way of quietly rewriting them. Watch the rep distribution when media gets full access to these practices. Watch how Mendoza moves through his progressions as the defensive looks get more complex and sophisticated. Watch whether Cousins looks like a quarterback genuinely building chemistry with this group, or like a seasoned professional executing his role with clear-eyed understanding of exactly what that role is and isn't. The Aboidir answers to the questions that actually matter for this franchise's next decade are coming. Every single practice rep brings them one step closer, and everything being assembled in Las Vegas right now is pointing toward a summer that's going to be very hard to look away from.